Hello, good morning, everyone. So this is the continuation of our topic. So today, we'll discuss to you the theories of language acquisition. So there are different theories actually, but this time I'd like to mention to you to discuss with you the seven different theories of language acquisition. So we have the behaviorist perspective, constructivist perspective, cognitive, sociocultural, the critical period or CP hypothesis, innateness, and interactionist perspective. So maybe these theories are familiar to you, but then again, I'd like to sort of review or a little bit of background of these theories of language acquisition. So behaviorist perspective, we have these terms like repetition, imitation, and habituation. No? So the first perspective to shed light to learning at language acquisition is behaviorism. So behaviorism jud no. Ang tanan halos tanan ng mga theories nag-evolve siya sprout from the behaviorist perspective. Behaviorists believe that language, like any other language, skills and values can be taught to children via repetition, imitation, and habituation. So, balik-balik lang, repetition, imit niya, sundog sa bata, then i-habit niya, then that habit becomes now the learning of the language. So, ingon na lang iyang gibali cycle of learning the language. Repetition, you teach the words, for example, and then to imitate the pronunciation of the words, for example, and then it becomes now a habitual. That is why when we try to um, teach that to our children, Monday to Friday, say for example, balik-balik lang ang topic, balik-balik i u ba bu na mabantayan nato. Actually, that is the concept of behaviorism, which we can apply to teaching our um, children, students, no. The most influential behaviorist is the Beef Skinner. So si Beef Skinner jud ang pinaka-influential aning theory sa iyang operant, no. Highly influenced by Edward Thorndike sa iyang connectionism theory or the theory of effect. So familiar na niyo uban sa uban nga mga prof ed nga subjects. Mao ni ang pinaka meet sa mga theories, no. Um, sa language acquisition natay sa learning sa parehara gyapon sa language acquisition. Different lang tingali dito sa execution of how we execute the strategies, the learning strategies sa tuang mga bata. So the three laws of education natay law of readiness, um, law of exercise, and then law of effect. That is why when a child is not ready in learning, say for example, he cannot even handle a pencil or a color, di ni mo siya pugson because he is not ready. You know, di siya pugson. We cannot, uh, it's hard to teach a child when he is not ready. Sa iyahang mga psychomotors niya, iyang mga tudlo, dili pa siya ready ni ana, pa siya kusog. So, dili nimo siya pugson nga pasulaton or pakuluron because he is not ready. That's the law of readiness. Law of exercise, when he is ready, so pwede na siya ma-exercise and uh, that would lead to the law of effect, which the language acquisition na. Pwede na siya maka-learn. Okay? Nana siya ang concept niya. So, si Skinner, sa 1957, most fondly known as Beef Skinner, is the father of operant conditioning. He admits that every individual has a brain that but argues that it's unproductive to study internal systems and that the best way to understand behavior is to look at the causes of an action and its consequences. So, by copying the utterances heard around them and by having their responses strengthened by the repetition. Repeat siya, correction na to siya, balik-balikon, depende sa correction. Dito ma-mention na to diya ang mga punishment, negative, positive, and other reaction that adults provide. So by this phenomena or phenomenon, children will learn to speak by repetition, correction, and other reaction that adults provide. As I've said in the previous lesson, katong sa motherist good, it's very important what language is what type of language or words are taught sa mga bata, because the children would just imitate what has been taught or taught to them, no? So that's why it's crucial part sa mga adults nga magtudlo og mga sa language words sa mga bata, kay ilaha man na sundugon, no? Children, no, are great imitators. So mo na ang concept, so magbantay ta kay imitation man. So since they are great imitators, we ato bantayan na to ang what we speak, no? Kaya mo na ilang i-learn. So he explains that a behavior, si Skinner, that is continuously reinforced tends to be repeated and becomes deeply rooted in an individual behavior, and a behavior that is not reinforced dies out. Meaning ang behavior nga ato ang gina-reinforce, let's say repeat tong gi-correctionan, mao to ang iyahang mahinumduman, no? Mao to iyang mahinumduman. And ang kadtong behavior nga wala na reinforce, mawala siya, so dili siya ma-learn. So meaning ang reinforcement is a big help, a big factor in the language acquisition, no? That is why we correct kung ano natong ginabuhat sa mga bata, kung mali ano ba itong i-correct, no? Skinner argued that children learn language based on reinforcement. Kung giingon ako ganina na say positive or negative principles by associating words with meanings. So the theory is called imitation, no? The imitation na siya. And then children learn to speak, the popular yes mo tong gingon ko copy niya, no? By reinforcing correct and accurate utterances, they are positively reinforced, which allow the child to realize the importance of accuracy and the communicative value of words and phrases. So, so communication man siya, because it's language acquisition, it's more on the vocabulary, teaching letters, alphabet, teaching the pronunciation of the words. So mauna siya ang ginatumbok din niya, no? So if the word ato ang ginatudlo is mamali ma-pronounce sa bata, so for example wala siya kabasa, ato na siya i-reinforce, no? Kung positive, buta na pwede na to siya intrinsic or extrinsic nga mga motivation inana, i-praise na to siya, very good inana, or mga extrinsic nga mga motivation nga mga reinforcement nga pwede na to siya tagaan ka og star o ana sa nga mga motivation, no? For example, when a child says mama and the mother smiles and gives her a kiss, the child will find this outcome rewarding, reinforcing the child's language development. So, wala siya na siya reinforcement. Na reinforcement dito is ang kiss nga gihatag sa mama. Language in the behaviorist perspective is viewed as consistent formal pattern, and through imitation, constant practice, language is developed just like in habit. So, habitual lang gyapon siya, no? So, mao na to siya. So, nato ginatawag og audio-lingual teaching method, also known as a military method, no? Ang audio-lingual. Why? Because it has three parts, basic parts. One is the presentation, wherein the oral and dialogue form with little explanation. Oral lang or dialogue, mga command ni siya, for example sa military method, go, ganyan na, oral or conversation, no? Pero wala siya explanation, just go, write, sleep, practice pattern drills to help learners master the structure of the language. So this grammar pattern drills, kung kabalo na sa grammar o sa basic concept of words, or how the words are formed, uh, from the simple pattern of the sound to word or the sound of ah, or mama. So practice na siya na under. So we practice from a word, then practice, then application. When this application used to memorize structure, so hindi rin na ang learning because the child has memorized the structure in different contexts na. So mauni ang nakanindot no sa audiolingual teaching kay sayon ra present, practice, and apply. No? So the imitation theory supports external factors that affects a children's language development, but it was not able to explain why, despite controlled exposure to the language, still children make innovation and changes to their utterances. So no matter how accurate the adult is in the use of language, children continuously make errors. Mali gid ng mga bata or deviation, meaning kung sa imong itudlo di pudto mao ang ilang sundon, deviate sila ba. Oh, so behaviorist cannot explain why when a mother says milk the child responds mimi, or when a caregiver says uv the child says ov. So it's a kind of a deviation, no, deviating what has been spoken by an adult, no, by a child. For example, imitation theory cannot simply explain the relationship of cognition and language development. Hence, the constructivist propose an alternative perspective on learning and language acquisition. That is why, because of this limitation, uh, because imitation cannot simply explain the relationship of cognitive, no, and language development because it's more on the reinforcement or the behavior itself. No? So that's why nating natawag og constructivist perspective na shared or proponents na to ani are John Piaget and Lev Vygotsky. So they argue that children are pre-wired, no? Pre-wired. The term is pre-wiring to learn and acquire language as they go through different developmental stage. So because of this pre-wiring, no? Uh, probag napundo na daan na sila, no? No? Um, the two most recognized constructivists, these two, although they are both highly concerned with how children acquire and construct meaning, their views quite differ. But unlike behaviorists, do not view children as empty vessels or tabula rasa, no, waiting to be filled in expert adult. No, katong tabula rasa, empty slate. Yeah, gulat lang sila kung sudlan, so ma-learn. Sa cognitivist argue na kay ang kamo ni siya, ang constructivist manggod og katong cognitive parehas ra na sila og mga prinsipyo, no? Sa cognitivist argue that children are pre-wired again in this developmental stage. Sa cognitive constructivism, because they are likened constructivist og ang cognitive, the principle is there is that interconnectedness of knowledge acquisition and language acquisition through qualitative changes in their mental processes as they develop. Uh, this theory views that children as active learners. So active sila in constructing knowledge over time as they interact with their environment. No? Dinhi ato ang mahibalaan ang terms sa sensorimotor stage. This is Piaget man siya, no? Kuan kay siya ni Piaget. Natay pre-operational stage, concrete, and formal. So, with these stages, developmental stages, maka-learn ang bata sa language. No? Sa sensorimotor, maybe it is familiar to you. It extends from birth to the acquisition of language. Sa pagsugod sa pagkatao niya. Children actively construct an understanding of the world by physically interacting with the environment using the various senses such as seeing, hearing, grasping, sucking, and stepping. That is why in this stage is very important what comprise what comprise in the environment, because there are many environments, no, daghang mga environment unsay naa diha. So na mama na papa na uban gani ka, it's ay mga wala no. So unsay naa din na mao to ang iyang ma-interact, because this is the physical world, no, na ang bata. So didha siya maka-learn sa iyang sa motherist niya nga concept, maka-learn dapon siya dinha. And then through the use of his or her senses. So diha na nga part ang sensorimotor, senses. So mo na ang iyang keyword. This development is called object permanence. Kanang natay object permanence diya that allows children to create mental pictures of things they perceive from the environment. No? Kani bitang um, an object continues to exist in their mind. No? Kita sila og ero baka do di pa sila makadetermine na nga ero na siya kay basin og katong na concept sa generalization, like um, the four-legged is associated to a dog. So therefore, when a child sees another four-legged animal, he could say that it's still a dog, but it's not. Mo na ang generalization, murag ma-generalize niya ba nga ang ero nga nasa upat ka tiil, kapag tan-aw niya sa kabaw kay upat na pud tiil, so ero pud to. So mao na ang kuan sa generalization. So diri niya is lahi ni siya kay because this object permanence mutatak lang siya ang mental pero dili pa siya makabalo makadetermine kung unsa to siya, no? Unless kung naim reinforcement na mahitabo or introduction or introduce sa adults. So ingon niya na ang iyang pag-explain. So the second stage is the pre-operational stage. Pre-operational. Wala pa sa nag-operate. Pre pa. This is the kadtong ginatawag og pre-wiring ba to? Mhm. Sa pre-wiring, pre-operational, meaning wala pa siya nag-operate. This is the preparation towards operation. Kanang makalihok nga siya. Or operate na, which begins with the children start talking approximately at age 2 and extends up to 7 years. So 2 to 7 years, pwede na siya mag-istorya. So they still do not understand concrete logic, no? Dili sila kakita og connection sa mga butang. Kung ingon ako ganina, dili ni sila makakita. Ang iro day lahi sa kabaw and have difficulty manipulating objects mentally. Moreover, they are still predominantly egocentric. So the term is egocentric. Hence, they have difficulty seeing viewpoints too of others. So meaning 2 to 7 years, dili pa na sila, wala pa sila yung mga kuan logic, wala pa sila, di pa sila kabalo sa una, di pa sila kabalo og connection sa mga butang, connection sa mga gipang istorya, connection sa mga gagmayng mga butang. Egocentric meaning ako. So knowledge development and language acquisition in this stage is primarily centered on pretend play, which is a form of symbolic play. Symbolic play is the ability of excuse me. Symbolic play is the ability of children to use symbolic function when children can now mentally understand, represent, remember, makasabot na siya, makarepresent na siya, makaremember na siya, and picture objects in their mind without actually seeing it, the object. So, nana sila ay buragbag, nanibuot mo sa tikto ba? Burag nanibuot ni bata eh. So, children eventually acquire intuitive thinking at the end of this stage. So this is where they begin to know everything as evidenced by their series of questions that seem endless and unquenchable. So meaning still considered as the crucial part no, labi na kung magtudlo na tang ani ang bata nga stage kay kung mamali na to gituro sa mga butang maglisod sila og sabot. The third stage is concrete operational. Ang concrete operational immediately following a pre-operational stage, 7 to 12 years old. So pre-adolescence na, which children begin to acquire concrete logical thinking like inductive reasoning. Meaning makasabot na gid sila no, kabalo na sila mag-reason out, no? Children begin to solve problems logically, and language acquisition moves to social matters and the emergence of egocentrism. So adolescence naman siya nga period, sense of personal uniqueness and invisibility. They begin to value justification and word choice. So kabalo na sila magkan. Ano na ni buot ko na ni. Kuya na ni Facebook na ni. Makigtigi na ni. Manubag na ni kanan, no? Inana nga mga konsepto. So the fourth and the last stage is a formal operation which extends adolescence to adult years. Adulthood na. So knowledge development is demonstrated through logical use of symbols, related abstract concepts. So nakadugang lang diri is na sa mga abstract concepts. No? Children acquire hypothetical and deductive reasoning. So katong inductive deductive actually lahi na siya nga topic inductive from the specific to general, deductive general to specific nga mag-reason out. Constructivist perspective of children acquisition is generally centered on brain development. So the keyword when you remember, kung maka-remember na ka, ang keyword sa constructivist is John Piaget and mind, mental, no? Cognitive, parehas sila. So, pre-operational, 2 years, knowledge is acquired, and nurtured of symbols, words, schemes are intuitive rather than logical. Intuition, tagna lang sila, no? Concrete years, it's a 12 to 7 to 12. Again, one of the mga keywords like knowledge is acquired and structured symbolically and logically. 12 and older, formal operation, na siya abstract meaning. Kabalo na siya mag-abstracting, no? Abstracting. So, sociocultural constructivism. So nakadugang sa sociocultural. So, social, meaning society, meaning interaction, no? Centered on the role of culture and social interactions. Keyword is social interactions. Of children with other children. So, no man is an island. Nani nga concept kung sociocultural. Speech is the major tool in the development of thinking because it's part of communication again. Dinhi sa sociocultural atong mahimamat si Lev Vygotsky. Nga siya ay zone of proximal development or ZPD. So as explained, potential ability na sa ZPD and actual ability. Vygotsky's theories implies that cognitive development and the ability to use thought to control one's own action require first a mastery of cultural communication systems and then learning to use these systems to regulate one's own thought processes. Unsa ning cultural nga communication systems? Where it started? Home, ano? Sa home. Unsay mga kulturanhon nga pamaagi sa communication na din napagapamalikas ba ang ginikanan kay mao pud sundon sa anak, no? Nagapang kuan ba siya, nagapang tawag ba ni mga bad words, foul language, mao pud sundon or ang ginikanan kuan lang siya um gatudlo og maayo nga pagtulunan kay mao pud ang sundon. So depende na po na ron ra kung ang bata karon kay sociocultural man ma-check na muna kay paggawas ana around dito sa society lahi na pud ang iyahang ma-interact. So pwede niyo na ma-check didto ay mali daytong na didto no sa sulod sa gawas kay lahi lagi no na may mga religious community. So inana so not it doesn't necessarily follow no nga kung ang ginikanan mantas then ang bata mantas pod kung ginikanan inana siya ang ginikanan ang manak ay nana pod it depends now because there is an outside interaction of the child or no sa yes sa child mismo no na si outside interaction na may religious community na may education na may other mga sectors sa gawas nga pwede makakaton siya didto ma-validate niya didto nga mali dito ang iyang mga nadunggan or tama ba kato iyang mga nadunggan so inana ang konsepto actually that is why when we teach our children our pupils in the elementary years, because the elementary years, the formal years, formative man kasi siya, more on checking, more on error, check, check, error, check, error, check. Yan naman, balik-balik lang, habituation, ganina. So, um, it's a big rule now of a teacher to really check, no, to really check. Now we have this. The most important contribution of Vygotsky theory is an emphasis of the sociocultural nature of learning. He explained that every individual has zone proximal development, or ZPD, the gap between actual ability, something that learners can do on their own, and potential ability, something that they can do with help of supervision. Meaning, ang nagisgot man siya diri og actual ability o potential ability. Ang actual ability, something that learners can do on their own, meaning is self-learning, no? Self-learning. I can do it. I can do it. And then sa potential ability, something that they can do, no? Can do more with the help of supervision. Kana bitong ginatawag na to scaffolding. So may best concept of explaining scaffolding. Tagaan ta kag bag. Ang bata tagani mog bag, no? Ang bag na zipper. Ang bag nga na zipper, kay di man siya kabalo mo abri. Oh, bata man. So abrihan nimo gamay. Pagkitaon di mo siya, abrihan mo gamay. Sunod-sundo na niya. Tapos pag sunod niya ay siya nimo abri. Siya nimo abri hantod makalapos sa pikas nga tumoy. No, sa tumoy hantod maabri ni gud niya ang bag. That's scaffolding, meaning there is a supervision of the teacher sa adult, no? Yes, tudluan nimo siya unsaon pag-abri sa zipper, no? Another concept is hagdanan. Oh, hagdanan. Di siya makaabot sa ibabaw kung di mo siya tudluan unsaong pagtikang sa mga ang-ang. That is scaffolding. Kasi actually, scaffold is hagdanan actually na siya nga concept ng building, no, sa building. So scaffolding ang tawag. So it's similar to the concept of education when we teach our children. A child exploring his environment will need a scaffold like a primary caregiver to help him label the objects he manipulates. So, label meaning help yun, caregiver. Sa caregiver, kita na yun ni teacher yun sa elementary years. He believed that learning takes place when children are working with their ZPD. No? A child without scaffold will continue interacting with these objects from the environment but will fail to acquire important vocabulary that will enable them to interact and communicate with others. Um, Shortly, the basic thing to explain here is to really, to really help, no? To really help the child to acquire the word, to learn the language. Meaning, imo jud siyang tabangan. Bro, ihungit ba na nimo kung makayag hungit para makakat-on lang siya. So, ingon ana man ang iyahang ang konsepto. So, another term is, we go directly to the critical period or the CP hypothesis by Eric Lenneberg. Si Eric Lenneberg, 1921 to 75, was a linguist and a neurologist who pioneered on innateness. No? Innateness. He argued that the development of language in children can be best understood in the context of developmental biology. That critical period in human maturation existed especially on language acquisition. So he explained that my interest, according to him, are in man as a biological species, no? And I believe that the study of language is relevant to this interest because language has the following 6 characteristics. According to him, it is a form of behavior present in all cultures of the world. No? Culture na po siya. No? It's a form of behavior. No? Second is in all creatures, its onset is age correlated. Na correlation ang tanang ang creature ba kita ang mga tao um from we or our birth the way of life, no, na ikalang bigitan dinaa, no, sa ato ang pagkat-on sa mga pulong, sa for example. And there is only one acquisition strategy. No, it is the same for all babies everywhere in the world. Naingon siya. Isa ra kuno. Then it is based intrinsically upon the same formal operating characteristics, whatever is outward form. Throughout man's recorded history, these operating characteristics have been constant. Operating characteristics, these are actually the the words, no, ang atong gipang kat-on, no, atong mga gipang kat-on nga mga pulong hantud karon nato diha pong gamit, no. It is a form of behavior that may be impaired, especially as circumscribed brain lesions, which may leave our mental and motor skills really unaffected. So, meaning in innateness, according to him, capacity of the brain to arrive at general principles based on adult speech. More on uh, innateness yun siya. Innateness yun siya, no? So, unsa ang innateness? Ato ang i-understand siya in the concept of language development. No? First language acquisition typically occurs in infancy and early uh, childhood. An important question concern whether the acquisition of the first or second language shows a critical recessive period. That is, whether acquisition displays a normal course and leads to full proficiency in the language, and it begins in early life. Uh, Meaning, the child is the language is from the infancy. No? The first language is from the infancy and childhood. So, sa pagkatao pa lang sa bata, according to him, doon na lingwahe ba? Doon na lingwahe. Ug pagka-mature hanto na adult siya, bro ba og nahasa lang, bro lagi panlinsingan lang, no? Wala bura pag gihulma lang ba, gihulma lang kung naabot yung mga mali-mali, hulmahon lang siya through the speech adult mga help, no? Pero sa innate-ness pag yun niya, naa na gyud na ang language. So mao ra gyud na iyang gusto ipasabot, no? So according to this theory sa innateness, natay ginatawag og another support the kini si Noam Chomsky child's language acquisition device, no? Actually, this is actually an opposition, no? Opposition siya to this innateness. This is a support actually. This is another theory that rose to oppose the behaviorist view of children's learning and language acquisition is Noam Chomsky, world's famous linguist to date. Buhi pa ni siya. The limitation of an imitation reinforcement views an acquisition led in the 1960s to an alternative proposal arising out of the generative account of the language. So, dinhi na siya ginatawag og LAD, language acquisition device. Na siya input, na siya language acquisition device with the universal grammar and output. In here, the first stage, we have the primary linguistic data, adult speech. Sunod niya nga arrow is we have the general language principles, grammar. Then, diri grammar knowledge. Diri kadto ni mga rules, ano, mga buot subayon para makakat-on sa mga pulong ug how the words are formed, how the sentence, the meaning, no? Sa grammar na gyud siya mismo. The context, no? And then the output, child speech. So in here, ang input is ang dako kayo importante ang adult yun, no? Adult, di siya may naghatag sa mga principles, sa yan mga knowledge, and then naka-istorya ang bata. So muna ang kuan ni Noam Chomsky, no? He proposed the theory of universal grammar, an idea of innate biological grammatical categories that facilitate the entire language development in children and overall language processing in adults. So because of this lad, we learn, no? We learn the language. But again, it's from the adult, no? Then I think it is the last, these interactionist perspectives proposed proponent by Albert Bandura. Yung tawag interaction, si Albert Bandura na iyang social learning theory or SLT. Albert Bandura nga dunay tulo ka buok nga mga terms under aning SLT: the process, observation, imitation, and modeling. In here, Albert Bandura explains that children learn from each other and from others through observation, imitation, and modeling. The theory explains that children imitate the words and language patterns they hear by watching and listening to the models, caregivers, and family members in their life. This theory has been identified as the link that bridges the gap between behaviorist and constructivist perspective to learning and language acquisition. So siya ang nag-connect sa gap ng kaning social learning theory. So sa interactionist argued that children are social beings and they need more than adults to observe, imitate, and model from, and more than an innate lad to create universal grammar from primary linguistic inputs. So they need to socialize. So the term is they need to socialize because they like any individual, children are social beings and they need language acquisition support system. Ginatawag na to GLASS, Language Acquisition Support System. Aha ni makita ang GLASS sa family, community, technology, and even print and non-print materials to help acquire the language. So, sa observational, napunta sa observational, mga phases sa observational learning. No? First is attention, second, retention, third, reproduction, and fourth, motivation. Sa attention, this is the, according to, ano siya, Slavin 1997. Sa attention, the first phase is observational learning, is paying attention to a model. Minaw ka sa model, minaw ka sa teacher mo, mo man ang ginabuhat sa mga bata. So this explains why children stop whatever they are doing whenever they see their favorite TV commercial and dance and sing to it, as if mesmerized, no matter how often it is played throughout the day. Ganahan yung sila mo tanaw. No? May attention jud, no attention. This phase actually explains why teenagers are hooked up with pop culture. They are visually attracted, tama yun eh, to this type of stimulus. Teachers and adults, therefore, must first understand what interests children and use this to capture their attention. Kani mo pinakalisod actually to get the attention of your tuti, your pupil, no? Kung sila ka-interest sila ha, so dito, nimo siya kuhaon mo yang kiliti para makakaton siya. Second is retention phase. Once teachers and adults have learners' attention, it is time to model the behavior they want students to replicate and then give learners a chance to practice or rehearse. Retention na siya nga sunod sa attention, retention na siya. Time to model na. Sa makadiha, makanta ba kadiha? You teach na. Sa reproduction, during the reproduction phase, learners attempt to replicate the model's behavior. Nagsundog-sundog na siya sa imuha. Sa word, how the word is pronounced. In the classroom, this takes the form of an assessment of learners' learning. In homes, it is when children act out the behavior as if they are their own. The last phase is motivation. The final stage is the observational learning process motivation. Children will imitate a model because they believe that doing so will increase their own chances to be reinforced. Ayan. So, mauna ilang gusto buhaton kitungod kay ganahan sila ma-reinforcean. Labi na og magsige ka diha og very good work of a princess, work of a prince. So inana, ganahan kay sa minaw ana. So kay ganahan man sila, ila na pong buhaton. Buhat na po na sila. And so there is also another contribution of Bandura. Kaning terms no, importante kini nga term sura kagawa sa licensure ning duha ba. Vicarious learning and self-regulated learning. Another two contributions. So, vicarious learning is the process by which children learn from the reinforced, so negative and positive learning of behavior of other people. So, naka-learn sila because of this reinforcement. Although most observational learning is motivated by an expectation that correctly imitating the model will lead to reinforcement, it is also important to note that people learn by seeing others reinforced or punished for engaging in certain behaviors. On the other hand, self-regulated learning is the process where children observe and evaluate their own behavior against their own standards and reinforce or punish themselves. Ang nakalain lang ani gay na reinforcement pero din hiya is a self-regulated, meaning this is a self evaluation of behavior against their own standards. O, makakat-on sila sa paghuna-huna lang, pag-analyze lang, mali man to. O, nana bitaw. Self-regulation, actually, kita mga adults, nagbuhat man taan eh. Self-regulated learners are effective because they analyze. First is, why? Nganong effective siya? First is, analyze, naka-analyze sila sa task. Teachers give them and set effective goals for learning. Second, use appropriate strategies to reach goals. And third, nagamonitor sila their progress and modify learning approaches if necessary. So these three important things are reasons why this self-regulated learning is effective. So take note that. So yan ang another contributions of Bandura. So the question is, how teachers can support students to become more self-regulated? First, support students to analyze tasks and to set appropriate goals. Second, explicitly support students' use of effective learning strategies. And third, support students' monitoring. Yan. So these three are actually helpful or help, big help, no? Para masuportaan na to ato mga estudyante para kay ang self-regulated man gud ang effective gud pud siya, no? Just support the students, no? So I think that is all for today with regards to language acquisition, and I will be continuing this lesson for, I think, last for under preliminary coverage. So later on, I will make another video for my presentation for prelim coverage. No, I think that is all for today. Thank you and God bless you. Keep safe and mabuhay Mindanao.